Yeah.
Usually you do that by, meddling in other countries' affairs in order for them to be dependent on you, because if they are dependent on you, you are not dependent on them. Cool. It can be mutual tendency, but you do want other countries to obey you. Secondly, you want security. You want people to not meddle in your country, so you don't want people to encroach you, to be very close to you. You want them to feel their distance. Or something. And thirdly, you want this economical growth, which is also mutually exclusive, because the resources are zero-sum, and the fact that resources are going into this country means that they're not going into other countries, or something like this. All of these things are zero-sum, which means that this is a very huge game of competition, where everybody wants to get what others have and stuff like that. Then it's like an endless circle in terms of it's game theory, in terms of if I don't do this, the other player is just going to do it. So it's basically forcing people, even if you are the most moral country in the world, to participate in this scenario. So this is usually the intentions don't matter. What matters in IR is just the incentives that will be created, even though somebody wants to act in a different way. So we can divide usually things, and this is problematic, wartime and peacetime. We currently live in a huge peacetime, specifically because of stuff like mutually assured destruction, which you probably know about, and stuff like that. But the framing that is very important is, if that was true, if mutually assured destruction was that powerful, Russia or nobody would actually care about anybody encroaching on them, right? Because if somebody encroaches on you, who cares? Because you have your nukes and you can do whatever. But the framing that goes here is that countries usually operate under more of a long-term basis, which means that currently, under status quo technology, you might have mutually assured destruction, but in 10, 20 years, 30 years, when we develop, ultrasonic mega rocket or something, this might be completely different, and the things might change in this sort of situation. So currently, it doesn't really matter that much that you have anti-missile rockets in Poland, right? But if these anti-missile rockets can become super anti-missile rockets or something very cool in the future, this is a threat to you in itself. So it's not the fact that currently anybody can harm each other, because we can't. Nobody will go to war with each other. It's the fact that you as a country, because you're living for so long, living to the lifetime of a country, or whatever, means that you are operating under this premise of there is a threat in the long run that I have to prevent in this sort of situation. So we have two concepts of sovereignty that I want to go over, which are important in terms of this wartime, peacetime mechanism. So as I said, peacetime is usually used for preparing for wartime or something like this. So you're basically using this time that you have to maximize your chances that if at any point something breaks out, you would have the upper hand. So if we have two sovereignties that are fighting you over, right? So if you want to exert your power, your military, power and prowess, you do need, allies. Because if you want, for example, to bomb certain countries, if you want to intervene, if you want to be NATO, bomb certain countries. If you want to do this sort of stuff, you need somebody to let you through the airwaves and let you pass and bomb a certain country, right? If they don't, you risk going to the war with that country as well, right? So you have sovereignty over the airspace of the whole thing. So this is a fun story how Bulgaria, no, but this is a fun story how actually NATO managed the pressure. NATO managed to exert dominance in, for example, Kosovo. If you look at the 1999, when there was when the war was being over, and sort of were defeated in the end, Russians were pretty pissed, right? They weren't asked about the intervention, they weren't invited, they weren't involved in any sense of the way. They felt like they were losing an influence in the Balkans or something. So they wanted to do something, and they wanted to do it fast. So they went and took Pristina. They went and took the capital city, and they wanted to hold it. This is a lesser known fact, because it didn't work out, right? So they went and held it. The largest problem in how this illustrates is, if you want to hold a certain territory, you need to have certain supply lines supplying you with ammo, food, whatever, oil, fuel, or whatever. The issue is, how do you do that if your country is landlocked? You can only go through, Hungary or through Bulgaria. of this. So what happened is basically they tried to go home. Bulgaria, which they had permission to do at that time, NATO called, like, yeah, what the fuck are you doing? Just deny these people access and we are gonna make you better off, or fuck with us and we're gonna fuck with you. Or something like this. So this meant that like Bulgaria basically closed its airspace towards Russian planes, similar to what Hungary did in terms of their interest in other countries pressuring. So that's fucked up Russian sphere of influence. And it's currently still fucking up Russia, right? Because like, for example, one of the reasons why Syria is ineffective, is not as effective as it could be, is because like Russia can only either bomb through the ground missions that they have in Syria, which is very unstable. If you want to hold territory in Syria where all the chaos is happening, where Israel can bomb your fleet and destroy it pretty easily and pretty fast, it's very dangerous. But also if you want to bomb directly from any of the better equipped military bases, you have to pass through Turkey, which is not going to happen because they're a member of NATO or something like that. So that kind of thing, and it almost escalated into a war, right? Like when Turkey took down the plane, Russian plane. So these things are very serious, and this is why, countries like Russia and China are having a lot of trouble to exert power, because like NATO members and people who USA can pressure into closing off their airspace means that your maneuverability and stuff like that is severely damaged if you want to intervene, if you want to help, and if you want to do something and exert your pressure. The thing that can offset this is also in the hands of America, which is very bad, which is this possibly the most important war technology that's existing currently, other than nuclear weapons. Can anybody tell me what it is? What is the most important military weapon?
Aircraft carriers?
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about. So I'm gonna just glance over it a bit because it's not that important. I want to go into more geopolitical stuff. But aircraft carriers can offset your inability to actually go through somebody's airspace, because if you can park it anywhere else, if you can park it, in the Mediterranean, you can bomb Syria. If you park it in the Indian Ocean, you can bomb all of these other Middle Eastern countries and stuff like that. So you have much more power to pursue. But the important frame is that power is not just you don't want necessarily just power in order to exert it. You do not want this so you will bomb people. You want this so you have always the threat that you can do this, and that people are more vulnerable towards you, which means that if you demand something, they're much more likely to grant you. So usually why you want this huge power and huge upswing is not necessarily to be acting like a dick, but by people perceiving you as being a dick means that they will going to concede a lot of stuff to you, or they're going to be afraid of you, or something like this. So this is the frame why you want military, not superiority, military power or whatever. So aircraft carriers. The issue with US has around 13, I think. The second largest player has 2, which is China. We built the second one now. This shows you how grim the situation is for these countries. They're fucking behind a lot. Aircraft carriers take so much time to develop because they're huge and they take so much resources. Also, it's not just about the aircraft carrier. If you just had an aircraft carrier without any fleet, you would just also die. It's usually a fleet around 10 ships around that ship who are going to guard them, who's going to operate them and stuff like that. So it's a very huge operation. And the fact that America is dominating means that they are currently dominating the seas and stuff like that, and it will become important in a bit. So, why can't they do it? 2 things geographically that are very important for you to be a dominant superpower, which is to have access to the sea and ports in terms of warm water ports, deep water ports. Those are the 2 crucial things. Why? Because the ship is huge. If it's not deep enough, it's gonna just be very bad for you. And if it's not warm enough, your ship is gonna freeze in this winter, and then you are not gonna be able to maneuver it that much. So those are all of the problems that Russia currently has, right? So Russia doesn't have any of these, for the except of Crimea, possibly, but Crimea sucks. So this is what usually people frame it as, Putin had to do it to get this warm water port for him so they can exert pressure, but it sucks because Bosphorus literally can be, you can, if in peacetime, they can possibly pass through Bosphorus. Nobody would care. People will let their ships pass. In wartime, which what you are possibly preparing towards, it will be cut off like this. It's a small passive way. It can be defended. It cannot be defended. Like, it's easier to defend people not going through than going through it than yourself or something like this. So that's like framing of it's important for Russia because of what I say, because of warm water port. Sure, to some extent, not the most important. But what is important if we talk about Russia, if we talk about all these countries, is not necessarily even you want to control this much territory, because territories are usually, especially in different countries, are a pain, right? You have their minorities, you have some rebellions, you have other things to support. You are responsible for these people, so you have drawbacks from gaining a lot of different territories. But the urgency is, if somebody else has that territory, you're fucked. So this is basically, if you were to ask what's the best solution, what's the best situation for Russia, it would be that Ukraine would be completely neutral and nobody would have it. Because if nobody has it, they don't have a threat, who cares? But if the allies have it, if the other side has it, the threat to their how do you say, homeland is enormous. Because like, historically, geographically, Russia is fucked. They don't have any buffer zones. Like, you can pretty much go, like Serbia would conquer it, probably. No, I don't know. But like, you can go with, like, there's a pretty open space where you can push your military through, where you can pretty much take the key positions in a country in like a heartbeat, especially with the current technology, and even worse with the modern technology or something like this. So just by this passage through and not having mountainous terrain, not being protected, means that they are pretty fucked. Which means that if anybody controls Ukraine, if that territory is in the Allies, how do you say, thing, they risk very much, how do you say, being completely locked out of the position of exerting any power anywhere, right? As I said, this is not, again, that anybody would attack them, but just the possibility of somebody using this is already a leverage that that country has over you. Just the threat of somebody doing something to you is enough for you to concede, and to have less sovereignty, and to be, how they say, willing to make more concessions to how they say, towards this country, which is pretty bad. So secondly, if a country is a member of the alliance such as NATO, the threat of NATO expansion into Eastern Europe is enormous, because usually countries like to test each other, right? Even now, like, Russian planes fly around the territory. So Russia is operating, they have this, how do you say, war games, which is basically called Zapad, which is, they are simulating, like last Zapad actually simulated the nuclear attack on Warsaw, which is like very cool. Oh my god, so they're provoking each other all the time, right? So you want to, it's like, not brotherly fighting, but like with two dogs, right? They want to bark at each other, but nobody wants to fight really. They just want to be the top dog or something like this. So everybody wants to provoke each other. The problem is, at the point where somebody is in NATO, that provoking and that thing becomes much more dangerous. Because if the Article 5, and the Article 5 is basically, you should defend your allies, you must defend your allies. If the Article 5 was invoked, NATO would be forced to, even if pragmatically they wouldn't want to do something, they would have to do something. Because in that scenario, it's either they do something, or it's the dissolution of NATO. Because it's basically calling your bluff. If you say to me now, dude, do not come closer or I'll slap you, and then I come closer and you don't slap me, then I wouldn't fear anything that you say after that. Like, I would just feel that you're powerless, or something like that. So the fact of the matter is, there's a hard line that they cannot cross in this situation. Obviously there's ways, and people bullshit, that people try to do, how to say, try to do the thing that they want, but it will be very hard to justify for NATO to justify not going in direct war. If, for example, Russia directly attacked Balkan states or something which are part of NATO. So, one of the cool things is in the IR, which illustrates that it's usually the reasons for the international relations are usually bullshit, and there is another reason. That even from the Roman time, they have found out that being perceived as a warmonger, as somebody who's doing something just to like catch a lot of territory, is very bad. So even like the biggest like dictatorships and stuff like that still want and still pretend and try to find still trying to find this casus belli, or how to say, like reason for war or something like this. So it's just based on how much of these reasons are we giving each other, so it's plausible for them to do something or not do something. So that's also a very, very interesting thing, even when you talk about democracy, that even the worst dictatorship would still usually pretend to be democratic, right? North Korea still has elections, right? Because and this is what I will come down in a second. Just playing this pretend game and something like this, and drawing legitimacy from that sort of situation. You know you're bullshitting now, but there is a chance of somebody being convinced in the future. So this is usually where I pose the question. So Russia invaded Ukraine. Pretty much common knowledge they did it or something like that. But they're currently still denying it. And when their military went into Ukraine, it was without any flag, Russian flag, without any signature that they're part of the military. If everybody knows this, if they still got sanctions and like we know it's bullshit, why would they bother at all? Do you have any idea? Yeah.
To justify their future decisions, even if it's not true, nobody can prove that they're lying.
But the cost, the end game is the same, right? Because like they still got sanctions. What would they gain? I mean, you're onto something with it.
In a better image for its allies, like let's say if they still are sanctioned based on the assumption they created that they didn't attack Ukraine, they can easily go like we're just persecuted.
But everybody knows bullshit.
Okay.
Well, maybe they don't have to answer before the International Court of Justice.
No.
The International Court of Justice knows it's bullshit, yes.
Because it's like they're depending on the technicalities. For example, in NATO, they have to defend each other if the country that is attacked is doing something stupid to provoke it. So they're trying to win the technicalities, and then they can say, for example, NATO is now fighting us, but see, we didn't actually invade.
So it's basically like this. Look, they know that so Putin knows that in the long run, losing Crimea is horrible. He also knows in the short term, sanctions are also horrible. Sanctions are bad for him. He doesn't want sanctions. This is why he's trying to do all of the other stuff towards it. But the way to offset it, and this is very crucial, if you as a country, especially democratic country, let's say European Union, want to justify to your people why your gas should be higher in order to punish Russia, usually people would say, I don't fucking care, dude. It's sort of like, who cares, right? So you need to convince your people that sacrificing some of their stuff is worth it and good. Because sanctions are not just hurting Russia, they're hurting businesses in Europe. Currently there's lots of pushbacks from Czech Republic, from Austria, from Hungary to remove the sanctions just because like, they don't care at this point. They just want more trade, right? In this sort of situation. So both countries tend to engage in this propaganda thing where they want to justify to their citizens, especially if you're a democracy and if somebody can oppose you and say like, what the fuck are you doing with Russia? We need more economic development. You need this justification for this. And similarly, when this is over and when you possibly want to, obviously, remove the sanctions, there is a part that sticks. This is what usually, like, this is a very cool concept, sticky propaganda. The issue is, everything that you say to justify you going against the enemy, fucking with the enemy, going to kill them, sanctioning them, is gonna fuck you when you then have to negotiate with that enemy. Because it's gonna, to your people, are gonna be like, if they're so horrible, why the fuck are we talking to them? Or something, right? So you have this propaganda that looms over even after the conflict is supposed to be done, and it creates, it makes it implausible for things to, how to say, solve on their own and stuff like that. By Putin leaving this, how to say, thing, Like, he knows that in the short run, and currently, when he does something like this, nobody's going to believe it, everybody's going to be like this. But just leaving a little bit of door open, and not openly doing it, means that if the countries want this and want to convince their people, they can draw from something that obviously we know is bullshit, but they can present to their people as some of the reasons, oh yeah, we found out new knowledge, they never went in like themselves or something, so they allow the other country to bullshit their way into it. Similarly to when we are, for example, if you're late for the bus, or if you're late for meeting a friend, right? Usually, you're like, why the fuck are you late? And then they tell a stupid story and then you move on, right? Because you accept that, like, I know your bus wasn't late 30 minutes, you were just an asshole, but fine. Okay, let's move on, let's still be friends again. Like, you're leaving this option of, you both know it's bullshit, you both know you're not that gullible, but at some point it's just fine. Like, let's just move on, we have better things to do or something like this. And by leaving this ambiguous, it's actually doing just that. If they were so open, it would be impossible for countries to justify not getting open fucked. If they don't, it's at least easy for the country to bullshit the reasons why we're doing something. This is usually a very good way to illustrate the thing. One more concept is, if you are fighting against the country, economical sanctions, putting economical sanctions against the country, or, wanting to invade the country, threatening the country, the largest issue is, if you are putting somebody into a corner, politicians especially, and especially their dictatorships and stuff like that, usually they would have nothing to lose than to fight back. The best ways to find solutions in the international relations is to try and present something that you negotiate as a win-win, even though it's not, and try to present it in a way. So leave dignity towards the person who you defeated in this situation is the way to make something happen. So the issue with all the sanctions is because if I concede to your demands without getting anything, I am the weakest leader ever, and people are going to throw me out. In both the US, in both like democracies and dictatorships, people are going to be pretty mad at this. So this means the best solutions have to come from giving somebody like a hand in terms of, like, you can see this like as why, for example, Kim Jong-un was more likely to talk when he was like validated as a leader or something, and he can present this as a victory or peace with something. But the best illustration comes from the Cold War. This is where, like, the largest story of the Cold War is usually the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? You all know about Cuban Missile Crisis. Russia wanted to put missiles on Cuba, nuclear missiles, and US said, no, fuck no. And then they said, this is the red line, if you cross this line, we are at war, and we are going to kill each other. And that's it. In the end, they didn't cross this line. It was very close to being crossed, to the line being crossed. So usually this is the surface level that people see. What people do not necessarily see, or what is behind the series, is a couple of things. First of all, that de-escalation came as the process of diplomacy between closed doors that the general public didn't know about, because it wasn't in everybody's interest to say, well, we are negotiating with people who are actually threatening war with us now. It's very uncomfortable. But secondly, that this whole shenanigans with Cuban Missile Crisis started because the US put their missiles in Turkey, which is close to Russia. And then Russia was like, oh, fuck you, we're going to do the same thing just in Cuba, or something like that. So in the end, after the negotiations, US got, like, the Cuban Missile Crisis was averted, and the missiles were pulled, and something like this. And the US and Canada could present it as like, this is a huge victory, we won against the Soviets, we crushed them, or something like this. But what he didn't tell the public, what he didn't emphasize, is that also the US withdrew Angel missiles from Turkey, right? Which is then things that Soviets could present as their win, as there's something like, oh yeah, look, we won against the US, we got these missiles who were very essential threat to us to move. So in this scenario, if you didn't have a win-win case and each of them could have presented it, it could have escalated way, way worse than it actually is. So that's a win-win theory. So let's then go to China. How much time do I have?
30 minutes, I think.
That's pretty fine. I'm moving pretty fast because I know I'm missing a lot of stuff. So sometimes we don't have the projector.
You can draw China.
What?
Just draw.
I cannot draw the map. I'm pretty bad. but okay. So
Sorry. You can also come closer to your laptop.
no, I don't have the internet. It's fine. I'm gonna visualize. So China. So all in all, if we were to pick between these three like huge superpowers, Russia would suck the most. So they have they're not militarily the strongest, they're not economically the strongest. If you pick between these two, they would be the worst out of them, and they are a bit less relevant. The only thing that they are doing currently to combat these things is to try to meddle a lot in different affairs, specifically, especially to pull the sanctions off, because sanctions are fucking them hard in this sort of situation. So you can see currently the Austrian government was stopped because they had to deal with Russians and stuff like that. There have been snap elections. They have been meddling in, they're trying to elect Marine Le Pen, like they're being in cahoots with Orban, Czech parties, which I don't know, and stuff like that. So he's trying to manifest and spread his power in a different way, and specifically with hacking and with doing this sort of stuff. So yeah, they're at least doing something. They're at least doing something to combat this. Okay, so next, China. So you know the history. Chinese Communist Party came. People were poor. It was horrible, and then they decided they are not communist anymore, even though they're going to keep the name. So they're from the 90s. They were pretty much capitalist, just with the name Communist Chinese Communist Party. So from Deng to Xi Jinping, they just started to open up their market slowly, and to open up the market to the wider world and to develop. So currently, China is going to overtake America as the largest economy. It's heavily based on exports in terms of like exporting, especially to the U.S. market. This will become important in a bit, or something like this. And their economical prosperity and their legitimacy of the government is actually based on presenting themselves as bringing people out of poverty. Because like controlling that amount of people, which is like 1.3 or 4 billion people, is so hard. It's super hard to control this amount of things, especially as a party, as a Chinese Communist Party. So this means that they still have to appeal to their people at least somewhat. And they're appealing by presenting themselves as bringing a lot of economical benefits. So their power is tied to that. This is important because you will see later framing, if this harms their ability to provide economical growth, this is probably not in the interest of the Chinese Communist Party. They'll probably react in a certain way. So how are they doing this? A couple of things. Let's talk about the war side again. So the Chinese, the thing that they're mostly afraid about, they have three large disputes that are very important. And the fourth one is just irrelevant at this point, which is Taiwan. Taiwan is also China, by the way. Taiwan is the second China. They're the people who fled the communist revolution, and they both called the Republic of China. No, this is the Republic of China, and this one is the Democratic Republic of China. Guess which one is communist? Democratic Republic of China is communist.
People's Republic.
Yeah, they have.
Democratic Republic of Korea. Maybe.
No. They have this. Fine. I'll show you the full name. People's Democratic Republic of China. Yeah. Anyway, in the end, so they also call mock elections, right? They also do have this tradition of trying to portray themselves with a dictatorship, fine, or something like this. So they have three disputes that are very important. One of them is South China Sea. This is where I will show you the map and stuff like that. But basically they claim the whole of it. They want everything. And so this is where the second sovereignty that I wanted to talk about comes into play. This is where the sovereignty over the sea near your border or something like that. So as I said, airspace you have. You can disallow planes to fly from your own country. But also you have the sea. The sea is arguably maybe even more important, because sea is also simultaneously, air travel is not that widely used for trade. It's used, you can obviously transport stuff, but it's much more costly and it's much more difficult. And like usually major, exports are being done by oceanic shipments, right? So ships and control over the sea is more important. So currently under the international law, it's around 200 nautical miles from your coast you have as your own sovereign territory. You still have to allow ships to pass. So this is why again framing is important. It's not that today China fears that anybody's going to refuse them. It's that in the future, if they want to sanction China, if they want to do something like this, and they can, say we disallow you to go to our waters, they can do this, and this is what they're preparing for. So it's not that currently they have any fear, because these countries wouldn't dare. But possibly in the future, somebody can stop their passage through it. And South China Sea is very important because it's connecting, and it's one of the best ways to connect yourself to Europe and to go to, not just Europe, Africa, and all the other countries and stuff like that. So, all the other, Middle Eastern countries, and, that's pretty much it. What you want to do, as China is claiming as much territory as possible, the issue is everybody wants to claim as much territory as possible. One of the things that is technically making the rules is it is basically being created for island nations, but it's being heavily exploited by other things, is that this nautical mile thing is also extending from your island that you control or something like this. This is it's not just China doing, it's like Philippines, Vietnam, they're all putting random people on a rock somewhere, building them a hut and saying like this is a fisherman home, this is why it's our sovereign territory. So this is everybody wants to. So everybody wants to claim more than they have, or something like this. So China is currently, China claims everything. They were sued in the International Court of Justice, they lost, they just didn't care, they said fuck you, we don't accept this. But then again, this is pretty similar to what I said before. They're still building the artificial islands inside of the sea. And you might say why if they're not just not affiliating with their international rules. But the goal, as I said, for a country is not necessarily to immediately win something. You want to create a situation upon which at a certain point in time in the future, you would be legal, and under a certain rule, you would be able to claim this sovereignty. So currently, you do not have any claims. If you build artificial islands, currently also you don't have any claims because people are like, this is artificial islands, fuck you, stop doing that. But in the future, if you can be more powerful, if you can exert more power, being legal and operating under this allows you to keep the benefits of international law when it suits you, but also keep them for these things which you want to claim for yourself. So international law is valuable, like even if it's being broken towards, like the US is breaking it, China is breaking Russia, every large player is breaking it, it's still valuable as a checks and balances against the countries and stuff like that. You still don't want it to collapse and for it to be like barbarism, free for all, or something like this. So in that regard, you want to be legal under it, but currently you aren't. And currently nobody's going to accept it. So you're building for the future. So the future concessions that you have, people might accept it or something like that. But for now, you just use force, which is what they're doing with the military at there. Two reasons why it's important. As I said, the first one is trade, like ships going through there, and how easy it would be for the US to block it and to block the trade ship that's going away. And as I said, economic growth, very important to China. Secondly is also resources, right? We have a lot of undiscovered resources that might be discovered in resource years. Currently, like the latest one that I know is Israel finding a lot of gas offshore and actually we're going to become an exporter in natural gas and stuff like that. There are some of these wells that you get found. And the law says that if this is under your sovereign territory in this nautical mile, you can get it, you can keep it, you can do whatever the fuck you want with it. It's pretty important to China specifically because they don't have that much energy resources. They're importing almost everything in terms of oil and gas and stuff like that. So this means they're pretty dependent. Similar to what US was like 10 years ago, but US is not anymore because they found large reserves inside the US. This is why people, when they say, oh, US likes oil, it doesn't make any sense anymore because like US is going to become an oil exporter country in the next 5 years. So they're going to compete on the market and sell their oil because they have more than they would ever need. So they got blessed again.
So basically, America will invade America.
Yeah, God bless America. So let's say it like that. So they are pretty blessed in terms of the territory. They have the access to both oceans. They have a couple of deep water ports. The geography is amazing. So I think that's one of the. If you were playing like a strategy game, like Civilization 5 or whatever, that would be the best territory to pick, honestly. Like if you wanted to invade. So they were geographically blessed to be a superpower that they are. They're fucking up in other places. I'm gonna talk soon about that. So China knows. So China knows that this is risky thing. So even though they're doing this artificial island thing, it's still decently easy for them to be blocked out. They're still not projecting their power completely. So what is the issue with them? That's what I call a second mutually assured destruction. So first mutually assured destruction is like nuclear weapons. Second mutually assured destruction is the economical mutually assured destruction. So currently they're testing it out, like there's a trade war between China and the US, but it's not escalating to serious proportion. But if it escalates more, it threatens to ruin both economies because they're both pretty much reliant on each other in terms of Chinese imports of cheap goods and China exporting to the US because it's cheap. So what influences these exports and stuff like that is this transportation cost, right? It's, if you can produce a good cheap, but then if you transport it for so long and it's so expensive for you to transport, it doesn't matter how cheap it is, local producers are going to be better than you in this sort of situation. So currently, the best way is to just cross the ocean, go to the US, export there, fine. But given that US climate, they want to diversify and they want to push it to other countries. This is where One Belt, One Road comes into play. This is Xi Jinping's brilliant initiative. Which I do think is very brilliant in terms of how they convince so many countries to work in their favor. So what is One Belt, One Road? So Belt stands for actually roads. Belt stands for the ground way which is trying to connect China towards Europe throughout Central Asia and like all the other countries there. And road is basically sea road, which makes no sense, but it's there. Which is basically trying to connect a lot of ports, which are going to import Chinese goods towards Europe, Africa, Middle East, and stuff like that. So how are they doing this? They're doing this by offering large sums of investment into the infrastructure of different countries. The largest barrier is that these countries suck. Especially like some of these countries, Central Asian countries, they don't have enough infrastructure and they have a lot of barriers between them and stuff like that, which means that if you want to cheaply export stuff, it would be very difficult for you as China and stuff like that. Similar to where if you wanted to do it with ports and stuff like that. So this means that if they get to build this infrastructure, their exports will become cheaper and they will be more competitive and they could take over European market and stuff like that. Why would they do it? Because the European Union is the largest market on planet Earth currently, even though the US is the largest market like, as a country. If you combine countries, if you say that the European Union as a whole, that's the largest market, the richest market where people want to access. But also it diversifies, which means that if US fucks you over, you can go to EU and vice versa and stuff like that. So you have more leverage if nobody can, like, I don't know, tell you what to do and stuff like that. So how are they doing this? They're offering loans. So they're not investing in countries that much. They're offering loans to countries at a rate. So the rate depends on basically how important are you to the Belt and Road Initiative, how crucial your way path it is. Or something like this. So for example, Pakistan will get a better loan than Kenya because Kenya is not that important towards the Belt and Road, even though it's fine. Yeah, sure, you have a railway or something like this. Montenegro will get a horrible deal, while Serbia will get a better deal, which is what is happening again currently. Or something like this. So you want the more important you are to the road, the more belt, the better favor you get. What are the drawbacks? A couple of things. First of all, it's a loan, right? You have to pay it back. So it's not like a gift or anything. It's similar to how World Bank is operating, just the Chinese, just Chinese institution. But the problem is three. One, other conditions in your relationship with China. So usually if you want to appease Chinese investment and like want to reduce it, you usually open up your market towards other Chinese goods and stuff like that, which is, yeah, sure, you got a railway, but you also ruined your economy in other parts in terms of like cheap Chinese textile ruining textile industry in Kenya, or like ruining actually textile industry around Africa because they can do it cheaper than this industry can and do that. Secondly, importing your own workforce. So the second usually in that for countries that are not as important is just Chinese workers will work this, which is brilliant in my opinion because you're not only forcing country to repay the loan, but they're also repaying your own workers with the money. So you're getting almost double the money to build the thing, which is great. So that's the second thing. The third thing is they are not that picky in terms of how much money you have. So for example, Western institutions, IMF, World Bank, they are doing two different things, but like they want profit. They're profit oriented. So if they see that the project is not feasible, they're just not going to give you the money. They don't care. This is why, for example, Montenegro couldn't get a loan from anybody except the Chinese. Because the Chinese were willing to possibly suffer losses. Why? Because like at this point, China gets more from having to exert power over like if you owe me money, you're less likely to fuck me over. You're more likely to stand with me in this situation. But also if you're strategically positioned, for example, like Sri Lanka, you can offer me other things that I can take instead of repaying off the debt. For example, Sri Lanka gave away its port in a 1990 release towards Chinese government in the exchange for restructuring the debt. And like returning it at a lower rate and stuff like that, which means that they are taking some of your stuff because it's in their interest. So this is currently what's happening. They're making a push towards all of the different markets. They're making a push towards Africa. Africa is becoming a kind of a weird thing towards them because China is developing and their standard is rising, so they're no longer the cheap labor force and they are less likely to be cheap labor force. So like Africa is becoming similar to what China was to the West in terms of like cheap labor force, and they're trying to build stuff there. China's China and stuff like that. So they're trying to control Africa and to exert pressure there specifically because it's very good to explore untapped potential in economic growth and stuff like that. What is the issues? So cynic would say nobody here cares, even the US doesn't care about dictatorships, non-dictatorships, human rights, that's true. But like, pragmatists and like if you were to ask what is the interest, US at least has to pretend, especially in 2019, they at least have to pretend that they're not supporting horrible, brutal dictatorships and stuff like that. This is why this stopped with the existence of the internet. There is much more pressure on the government, people are much more informed, and stuff like that. Well, this doesn't exist in China, people just don't care. Which means that if we compare the two things, China is currently much more likely to support and to be fine with supporting dictatorial regimes in this sort of situation, which is not making them friends with the people, but it's making them friends with the people's dictators. So this sort of scenario that can be viewed as bad. But China is trying to connect itself economically to a lot of different countries. One of the reasons, general reasons, why this is a viable strategy towards any country is if you economically entangled with other countries, first of all, war becomes less tolerable. If you ever played any strategy game like Rome Total War or Civilization 5 or any of these things, like whenever you go to war with someone, you lose all of the trade that you have with them or something like that. So the more that you have to lose, the more likely you are to rethink the thing that you want to do. Similarly to sanctions, similarly to anything that is going to ruin the relationship with them, if your industry and if your economy is based on, cheap imports from China, cheap parts from China, or tech from China or whatever, you're less likely to want to do anything against China. This is why, for example, even currently, you can see foreign media companies, like even the large media companies, you can basically see that not reporting as much on China, Xinjiang province, or Tibet, or something. When is the last time that you read anything about this? It's very low radar and very low amount of people write this because a lot of these people have stakes in Chinese companies. China is a very good partner. So in terms of if you compare how much Western media bashes Russia towards how much Western media bashes China, is disproportionately different, right? Because China has much more power to exert over you if you fuck with them in this situation. So second geographical problem of So second geographical problem of China, which is two provinces, Xinjiang and Tibet. So basically Tibet is pretty much done deal. They have established almost full control over it. Xinjiang is not necessarily. So those are both two provinces that have secessionist tendencies. The issue is, and this is how scared China is, that Xinjiang didn't even have that strong secessionist tendency, but just the fact that there is a threat of secessionist tendency means that they don't want to risk it, they don't want to do anything with this, which means that they did start to crack down into, crack down on Muslim population, to do re-education camps, and they want to have a mass surveillance and stuff like that, to imprison people, basically all the horrible stuff that is happening there. Why? Firstly, if we talk purely about geography, similar to Russia, right? That part is like the largest buffer militarily that prevents anybody ever being able to ground invade from that side. And that's military. But secondly, if you want your belt and road to work, if you want your belt part to work, you have to pass through these provinces. They're very important for you to connect. And if these provinces were unstable, or they were, a threat, not just unstable, but just a threat of secession or something like this increases and decreases the ability of you to control this road, and this decreases your leverage. It's also a very large threat that your enemies and people who you were up against are going to spur conflicts exactly in these territories specifically to try to combat you. Because that's basically the name of the game. US funds paramilitary there, and then China funds it. This is basically a Vietnam War was basically one big shit show that everybody funded the other people or something. So basically, there's a large threat of your program working if these things go well. So just Chinese Communist Party doesn't want to, they don't want to risk it. Middle East is becoming a bit less relevant, especially because US doesn't need any more oil, and especially because the whole world is moving away from that sort of situation. Loads of their economies are not diversified, which means that they're purely based on these export resources. It's just people do not care as much. US is more focused on trying to curb China, or at least should be more focused to try to curb China. Which means that you have to split your resources. You cannot do everything that you demand your resources. In terms of both military bases and political capital and sanctions and stuff that you can do. So it's becoming less relevant. China might be coming there. China is decently interested because they do need cheap oil. So it's basically they're switching positions and stuff like that. They're currently pretty fine with Iran. Well, currently there is a shitstorm happening in Iran, which I don't have time to cover, but you should read up on that. There's threat of escalation of war. But the Middle East is less and less relevant in this regard. Latin America is sadly also less relevant in the IR currently. The only battlefield that is interesting is Venezuela, where Russia and China are funding Maduro, and all of the other people are funding the other guy, Guaido. Everybody's bad here. But this is basically, again, you're trying to why would it be in China's interest ever to do something like this? You're trying to make your enemy simultaneously. You want people to get the fuck away from your neighborhood. But one of the better ways to do it is to spur shifts in their neighborhoods. Because there is a list of priorities that a country needs to do. You first need to control your own backyard. If you have this is why Cuba was so dangerous towards America during the Cold War and something like this. And this is why they tried to assassinate, Castro like 30 times or something like this. So if you spur up conflicts near the country, near the country that you're fighting, that's one of the better ways to actually try to combat that country or something that's just funding and doing something like this. So we're kind of sliding into a new Cold War. I think so. Secondly is Africa is actually becoming a very large battlefield in terms of fighting for countries within it.